everybody. In the Legislative Building in Regina, we have Premier Scott Moe and Deputy Premier Gord Wyant to announce the Building a Strong Saskatchewan plan, a $7.5 billion economic stimulus package. Joining us over the line is Dr. Shahab, Scott Livingstone, CEO of the Saskatchewan Health Authority, and Dr. Susan Shaw, Chief Medical Officer for the Saskatchewan Health Authority. Both Premier Moe and Deputy Premier Wyant will have opening statements. We'll also have a brief opening statement from Dr. Shahab on the line. Premier?
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us here today. I am very pleased to be joined by Deputy Premier Gordon Wyant, our Minister of Education, also our Minister responsible for Sask Builds, to announce a substantial investment in building a strong Saskatchewan. And I'm very pleased to make an announcement that will further stimulate our economy as we begin to recover from the economics of the COVID-19 pandemic. But before I do that, I will provide a very brief update on today's COVID-19 case numbers, and we'll hear briefly from Dr. Shahab, who is joining us by telephone here today. Today we have 25 new cases, bringing our provincial total to 512. 24 of those new cases are in the far north, in Loche and the surrounding area. And the outbreak in the far north continues to be very serious for this province. And we continue to monitor the situation to ensure that the necessary supports are in place to provide residents in the area to not only self-isolate but also to physical distance. Now I'll just ask Dr. Shahab, if you'd like, for an update in a little bit more detail on today's COVID-19 numbers. Dr. Shahab?
Thank you, Premier. So I will just go over the numbers in a bit more detail. So as the Premier said, we have 25 new confirmed cases, out of which 24 are in the far north in the Loche area and one in the Saskatoon region. And if you look at, we have updated the information on the website, and if you go to our information on the website, you will appreciate that while obviously the outbreak in La Loche and area is very concerning, when we look at the table showing active cases, we can see that apart from the far north and the north, which is impacted due to the Lloydminster outbreak, things are pretty quiet in the rest of Saskatchewan, which enables us to proceed with the reopening Saskatchewan plan. For the rest of the province, there'll be a review of the situation in Lloydminster end of this week and early next week, but that outbreak seems to be at this point contained. But of course, we expect to see, with very active case finding, ongoing cases that are mostly close contacts for initial cases that are being found through active contact tracing and testing, which is a good thing. While the case numbers are alarming, they are being generated through very active case finding, which allows cases, even if they're mildly symptomatic, to be effectively isolated in a way to limit the outbreak from spreading further. Furthermore, if we look at the age ranges of the cases, we are now seeing an increase in the 20 to 40 age group, which again is partly due to the transmission in mostly younger age groups in the La Loche area. And most of the cases so far have been mild, with effective isolation in the home setting. And finally, if you look at the number of tests ordered, we have now 1326 tests that have been done in the far north. So testing continues to be done at a high level, and that is resulting in increased case finding. And testing continues in the rest of the province as well for all people who have even mild symptoms. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shahab, for all you do for the province. Across Saskatchewan, we must continue to be vigilant in observing physical distancing practices. We've seen firsthand, time and time again, that these practices work. So now in today's announcement, for the past several weeks across this country, we have been paying people to stay at home. Governments of all levels have been paying businesses to stay closed. And I understand why we had to do that, and it was the right thing to do. But moving forward as a society, we need to get back to paying people to go to work. We need to invest in businesses to operate and to build. That's how our economy is going to recover. That's how we are going to create new jobs and return to our existing jobs. And this is how we will, and that is the plan that we are announcing here today. Today we are announcing a plan to build a strong Saskatchewan, a plan that is an early but major step in Saskatchewan's economic recovery in the months and the years ahead. Over the next 2 years, our government will invest $7.5 billion in schools, hospitals, highways, in Crown utility projects, in municipal infrastructure, and a number of other important capital projects designed to build a strong province of Saskatchewan. That is a $2 billion increase over 2 years, a $2 billion economic booster shot over and above the $5.5 billion our government had already planned to invest in capital projects over the coming 2 years. The $2 billion stimulus injection will balance the need for smaller, short-term projects to jumpstart our economic activity and to get people back to work quickly, with longer-term, large-scale projects that leverage multiple sectors over the course of the next couple of years. This capital injection includes new capital funding of over $300 million for highway projects, $200 additional million for healthcare infrastructure, and over $135 million for education infrastructure. Specifically, the $2 billion capital injection to build a strong Saskatchewan will be allocated as follows: $1.37 billion for large infrastructure projects, including over $100 million for new healthcare infrastructure, and over $110 million for new education infrastructure, with additional allocations that will be announced in the dates ahead. Sask Builds will provide oversight as well as the project management and procurement expertise. The design, the engineering, the architecture, construction, and project management costs are included in this total, and with the goal of ensuring projects are shovel-ready not only this year but into next year. And the $2 billion capital injection includes an additional investment of $300 million in highways projects, focusing on thin membrane surface upgrades and passing lanes, including $46 million that will be dedicated for upgrades to municipal roads and airports. The $2 billion capital injection includes $181 million for renewal projects to reduce the deferred maintenance on provincial and third-party assets. This includes renewal project funding such as an additional $100 million for healthcare infrastructure, and about $26 million in renewal infrastructure in education, with the remainder addressing priority projects in a number of other ministries across government and agencies. And lastly, the $2 billion capital injection includes a $150 million investment in a renewed Municipal Economic Enhancement Program, or the MEEP program, to support infrastructure projects in communities right across this province. And I would note that this $2 billion is in addition to the $2.7 billion Crown and executive government capital investment that was already announced in this year's estimates, and over and above the $2.8 billion that we are planning to invest in the next fiscal year, bringing our total investment in infrastructure to $7.5 billion over 2 years. Our estimates announced on March 18th by our Minister of Finance, the Honourable Donna Harpower, included a number of very important infrastructure projects that included 10 major school projects, including ones in Regina, in Saskatoon, in Carrot River, in Yorkton, in North Battleford, and in Wilcox. It included a new Prince Albert Victoria Hospital, as well as continuing towards the construction of a new hospital in the community of Weyburn, a new long-term care facility in Meadow Lake, and it included a new CT scan in Melfort. It included 1,000 kilometers of highway improvements and 24 new sets of passing lanes, as well as significant investment and safety improvements at highway intersections throughout the province. Very importantly, much of this funding will have a significant impact in assisting municipalities with priority infrastructure projects, boosting our construction industry, and creating jobs right across Saskatchewan. This investment over the course of the next 2 years includes more than $320 million that will be provided for municipal infrastructure, starting with the $150 million in the Municipal Economic Enhancement Program, or the renewal of the MEEP funding. the $130 million invested in the Canada Infrastructure Program, or the ICIP program, and the $46 million through highways that is targeted to municipal roads and airports. Again, this investment is in addition to various municipal transfers that were highlighted in the estimates this spring, and in addition to municipal revenue sharing. Over the last several weeks, construction, including maintenance and repair, has been operating as an allowable business service by the government of Saskatchewan in the province of Saskatchewan. And to ensure the safety of workers and communities, work sites will continue to be required to follow all physical distancing measures and restrictions that remain in place through the 5 phases of the province's Reopen Saskatchewan plan. And we are thankful for our Saskatchewan construction industry. We are very grateful for the strong Saskatchewan construction industry that we have here. Through this funding, our construction companies and our construction workers will have the opportunity to continue to build a stronger Saskatchewan. And in turn, we will create good-paying jobs while they do it. In fact, based on Statistics Canada data, projects funded through this investment announced today are expected to support approximately 10,000 jobs. And the increased investment in infrastructure funding supports the province's growth plan commitment to build strong communities by investing $30 billion in infrastructure over the course of the next decade. Because we know, as we recover from COVID-19, a strong Saskatchewan, a strong and growing Saskatchewan, is more important now than ever. This $2 billion capital injection increases our total investment to $7.5 billion over 2 years. This is a major step in building stronger communities and building a stronger province. I'll now ask our Deputy Premier, Gord Wyant, to say a few words with respect to Sask Build's initiatives.
Well, thanks very much, Premier. Well, as the Premier noted, we want to help Saskatchewan industry and companies and workers get back to work. And we know that investing in infrastructure is one of the best ways to do that. It's certainly going to be one of the keys to our economic recovery. Sask Build's priority in this stimulus plan is to ensure that local jobs are preserved or created and that local sectors are supported. That work will be led by Priority Saskatchewan, who has already achieved a great deal of success in this area. It's something we're very proud of the accomplishments that they've had. In fact, after establishing the government's single procurement service last year, more than 92% of all contracts were awarded to Saskatchewan companies, and we want to build on that through this investment. There are a number of tools available to Sask Builds to ensure stimulus products benefit Saskatchewan sectors through sector engagement and through planning. We want to maximize the benefits of Saskatchewan people and communities, and I want to assure our industry and our businesses that as much as possible, the work will be performed by Saskatchewan workers as we reopen Saskatchewan. We know that building a strong Saskatchewan means building on the strengths of Saskatchewan workers, and that's precisely the goal of this plan. Thanks, Premier.
Thank you. We'll now have about half an hour for questions. We'll take our first question from the room here. Steph?
Yeah. For the Premier, what is your plan to increase the number of tests that are being done in this province? Because April has come and gone, and we did not see your goal of 1,500 tests per day reached by health officials here.
All right, what we saw in the province was our, between when I made that statement and today, is our numbers have dropped in most areas of the province. We do have a few outbreaks, of which I'll speak to in a moment, but by and large, across much of the province, as Dr. Shahab had said, our numbers are relatively quiet, and we haven't had the requests for tests, quite frankly, which is a positive thing, by and large, for the vast number of communities here in Saskatchewan. If you look at what is happening in an area, well, you pick a few areas, Lloydminster, Prince Albert, and more recently Meadow Lake, with the testing that has occurred and the contact tracing that has occurred with well, in 2 cases, one case that arose in the hospital. The tests have shot up briefly there, and as well as the contact tracing, but most notably in our province's northwest, where we are working with our local communities on a much more serious outbreak at this point in time in and around the communities of Loche and some of our other northwestern communities. We are increasing not only our testing numbers in that area, but very much focusing our testing on not only those that have been in contact with someone that has been tested positive for COVID-19, but are also going beyond that in our drive-through testing opportunities. We have a Gen Expert machine operating in a couple of communities, including Loche in the northwest, as well as we have a surge testing going on, essentially door-to-door offering testing of individuals in the community of Loche. So we are, our testing is starting to increase again from where it was maybe a week or so ago, and I would expect that it may increase in the days ahead. In particular, dealing with the one more serious outbreak that we have in Loche and that surrounding area. But if we are able to get that particular outbreak to a more manageable situation, we may see our testing decrease again. But that I don't think that would be the expectation in the next few days. I don't know if Dr. Shahab or Scott Livingstone would have anything to add to that, but it is my understanding that if people are exhibiting symptoms, or in particular, if people in the community of Loche or those surrounding communities would like to be tested, we will be making it available to them. I guess I have nothing.
So this is Scott. I'd just like to add to a couple of comments the Premier made is, one, with respect to the testing strategy, the province has always had the capacity to do more tests than we have been able to deliver, and that has been intentional. We have always been planning to ensure that we have, just like we are surge capacity for acute care, in our defensive strategy is over the next few months. As we know, COVID is not going to leave us. We need to make sure that we have capacity both in the number of tests we can do today, and I'd also point out that we've never had a backlog in tests in Saskatchewan like some of the other jurisdictions have had, as well as since we started this journey with COVID, we went from using one lab in our province, the Roy Romano lab, which has been certified by the National Public Health Lab to verify tests very early on in our journey. But to the Premier's point around the Gen Expert machines, we have put Gen Expert machines in multiple communities. I think that the total will be 15 when we're done. And I think we'd be hard-pressed to find jurisdictions in the country that had more geographically dispersed testing capacity that we will have to be able to manage outbreaks on an ongoing basis as we start not just reopening our economy, but reopening the healthcare system.
Do you have a follow-up, Steph?
I do. Other premiers and even Canada's chief medical health officers talked about the need to increase the number of tests are done. That's obviously different than speeding up the number of tests, which the Gen X machine really does. So, Premier, have you abandoned that goal of getting 1,500 tests per day? Are you satisfied with the number, just never not reaching that?
I'm satisfied by a large part where the numbers are in most of the province of Saskatchewan. I'm satisfied with the ability that we have had just over the course of the last week or a little better to test and contact trace outbreaks in a number of different health facilities in Lloydminster, in Prince Albert, and what looks like, and I hope we'll be able to have similar results in Meadow Lake. We do have a challenge in the Northwest, and it is my expectation, and it is happening, that our test numbers are increasing in the Northwest, as well as our contact tracing efforts in the Northwest, which are there as people not only on the ground conducting testing and contact tracing, but they're also being supported by people that are not in the community through digital means or a good old-fashioned telephone on the contact tracing efforts that are there. So it is my expectation as we look ahead in that Northwest area that our testing numbers will increase. It is my expectation that if there is an outbreak in any community or facility in this province, that our testing numbers will increase that area. I'm confident we have the capacity to do that. But it's not just about testing. It is about having that contact tracing and then the ability to isolate. So we have been working very closely with the SHA, with the Public Safety Agency, and with our Northwestern communities to ensure that we have resources in place in all three of those required the required ability, if you will, if we're to manage this outbreak that we have up there. So there needs to be increased testing numbers, particularly in the Northwest, and that is occurring.
We'll take our next question from the phone line, operator.
We have Adam Hunter with CBC.
Given how the virus is spread in the north, how concerned are you that it can be contained to a certain area? We know that the PA hospital case was related to Loche. We don't know about Meadow Lake officially. We know Saskatoon Confederation in. Can we say that it's been or going to be limited to the Northwest, and what's being done to keep it in the community besides the checkpoint efforts?
The goal is to keep it not just in the community, but to keep it with the people that currently have it. The goal is to flatten the curve across this province, and that includes in the community of Loche. And that's why we have sent now over 60 conservation officers up into northern Saskatchewan and the northwestern parts of this province to support the checkpoints that the communities have put in place. That's why we have set an untold amount, maybe Scott can provide the number of Saskatchewan Health Authority employees to provide surge testing into those communities. That's why we have provided, I believe by today or possibly tomorrow, we will have 15 plus self-isolation trailers on the ground in the Loche. That's in addition to about the 30 Sask housing and education housing units that we have in the community for use for self-isolation, and also in addition to the 20 to 30 places that we have outfitted in the school in the community as well. So we are, providing resources in conjunction with the conversations that we are having in the community, and those resources not only are dollars, not only are human resources, but they are in the way of working with the communities on public health orders, for example. And we see today that the communities of Stony Rapids and La Ronge have both joined with all of the other communities in the Northern Administration District as well, asking to be included in the travel restrictions that we have in place, not only for people traveling into the north, not only for people traveling out of the north into the southern areas, but for people traveling between communities in the north. And so that is why we are providing the additional human resources to augment and to actually enforce the public health orders that are in place throughout the northern Saskatchewan. So this is not a situation that I think any of us anticipated or would look forward to, but it's one that we're faced with, and we will face it shoulder to shoulder with community leaders throughout the north.
You have a follow-up, Adam?
Yeah, I would just like to ask the SHA perhaps if they're concerned about the number of health workers that are needed to isolate now, given the cases in various hospitals, and maybe an update on how many staff are isolating and what the plans are to make sure that they are not short-staffed.
So I'll start. And are we concerned about staff that need to be put in isolation? Absolutely we are, but we are managing that just like we're managing the outbreaks. We're starting to see good news. As early as last week, there were 20 plus employees in La Loche, as an example, that went back into service into the Loche community that were on self-quarantine. We're seeing PA Vic with no new cases, and as well as staff that were determined to be close contacts and been tested. I believe the ICU is now open again in PA Vic. So with aggressive contact tracing, with the isolation efforts that are going on, including in Lloydminster, we are seeing staff coming back to work that have met those requirements and have been testing negative, and we are retesting staff that are currently on quarantine to ensure that even though they're asymptomatic, they're not going back into the workforce after their 14-day isolation infected.
We'll go to our next question on the phone line, operator.
We have Murray Mandrick with the Leader Post.
Good afternoon, Mr. Premier. You said earlier that a strong and growing Saskatchewan is more important than ever, and I guess people can agree with that. But you've also said the proper operating spending is more important than ever. You've also said that we need to maintain strong fiscal positions. I don't really know how telling the city of Regina and Saskatoon that they have to spend $150 million on infrastructure is better than giving them operational money to contend with their own issues. There's going to be people that are going to ask how spending $255 million the next year on highways, on things like thin membrane surfaces, is really all that wise a decision when you could be running out of money given the fiscal situation your finance minister outlined 2 weeks ago. So I guess what I'm asking is capital spending in the way that you outlined it, given the concerns raised on operational side, really the best way to go right now?
Yes, it is. Yes, it most certainly is. And we have seen municipalities across this province that are facing challenges, much like our small and medium, large-sized businesses are facing, like all levels of government are facing in the fiscal challenges, if you will, the fiscal side of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we are moving forward with this capital stimulus injection. We are also part of this injection is to provide $75 million a year, $150 million in total in our MEEP funding, so that the municipalities have the capital dollars available so that they can participate in infrastructure projects that are vital and of not only provincial interest but community interest. And so that $150 million right there provides the opportunity to get people back to work in communities right across this province and get them back to work on infrastructure projects that are a priority to the community that they live in. The second thing I would say, and this is under active consideration within the government of Saskatchewan, but is there an opportunity to front load our municipal revenue sharing program and to provide that in the days ahead, as opposed to metering out over the course of the year, so that our municipalities have the financial flexibility to make decisions today, knowing that they will have those dollars in their account, as opposed to metering that out over the course of the year. So this is a multi-pronged effort, if you will, and many conversations that are happening at the provincial level of government to, one, capitalize on any federal programs that are in place for all members of our community, but two, ensure that we are able to augment or enhance the economic recovery, if you will, through significant infrastructure investment, infrastructure that is important for provincial and community priorities, but by providing a portion of that infrastructure investment directly to our municipalities, understanding the fiscal pressures that they too are facing, providing them the opportunity to participate in the infrastructure that is very important to them. So I feel this is of vital importance as we try to enhance the economic recovery and provide the opportunity for people to get back to work from corner to corner in this province.
You have a follow-up, Murray?
Yes. If you're confident in that position, which you obviously are, why not take this position to the legislature and have it debated in some form or the other, either online or otherwise? We're dealing with a significant amount of public spending right now that's not getting any kind of opposition scrutiny. And if I may, just one bonus question so I don't leave Dr. Shahab out. Can he tell us how many tests are actually being conducted in Loche specifically?
Dr. Shahab, I'll just mention a couple of comments with respect to scrutiny on government spending, and then if you want to answer to testing in the Northwest and Loche specifically. We have never said that we wouldn't be going into the House, going into committee, going in to ensure that the people of this province have the opportunity to have scrutiny on the investments that the government has made. I would also add that all of the investments that the government has made have been tabled in the legislature on the last day that we were there, as our investment estimates were tabled on that particular day, and the special warrants that were provided a few days ago were based on those spending estimates that were tabled by our Minister of Finance at the dissolvement or the suspension of our legislature here this spring. So it's just a discussion that has not occurred. My understanding is the House leaders may be having a discussion on that in the days and weeks ahead. But point taken. But the fact of the matter is I think the people of this province have had ample opportunity to scrutiny any of the government decisions in each and every day that I have made myself available, and other ministers have also made themselves available to the public through briefings just like this.
Dr. Shahab, do you have a comment on the number of tests in the Loche? Do we have Dr. Shahab or perhaps Scott Livingstone on the number of tests in the Loche?
It's Susan Shaw here. I believe that the accurate number as of this morning is that's been a total of 727 tests done in the Loche Geography Health Network.
We'll take our next question from the phone line, operator.
We have Laura Woodward with CTV.
Hey there, I'm just wondering if you can explain a little bit more about the outbreak situation at the Meadow Lake Hospital, what happened, and also if you can clarify what classifies an outbreak when there's just one case.
Scott Livingstone or Dr. Shaw or Dr. Shahab, any of you?
Sure. This is Scott. So Meadow Lake Hospital, as you know, there was officially a outbreak declared by the local medical health officer last night. Conversations were underway with local operational leaders first. The outbreak is confirmed as a single confirmed case of a healthcare worker, which is that individual related to a community transition. So there's contact tracing underway. Addition to that, we have 8 additional staff that have been tested that have all received negative results this morning. However, we are going to be retesting, and they're all on self-quarantine. We did do a formal communication out last night to the hospital first, but then followed up by a public service announcement. With respect to what's defining an outbreak, we've had lots of discussions about that, and we are working, as you know, with Dr. Shahab and the rest of the medical health officers to nail down exactly how we're going to define outbreak and cluster. You're seeing us, I would say, err on the side of caution now when you say, because the question is now, why are we declaring an outbreak with a single case? But I think the best answer to that is a case like the individual in PA where we had a single individual, but in facility for a number of days without knowing and exhibiting symptoms, and the exposure to staff can be a big risk. So that's a good example of where you have a single case that have multiple exposures with lots of contact tracing and lots of follow-up that can have an impact on services. So in those situations, we feel it's necessary to define an outbreak. But we will be by this Friday clarifying how we will be approaching that communication around outbreaks across the province with all the medical health officers, so it's consistent. Do
you have a follow-up, Laura?
Yeah, I'm wondering what happens if the effective reproductive rate exceeds 1. Will the province make any changes to the reopen plan?
Yeah, hi, Saqib here. So maybe I can speak to that. So we knew that when the reopen plan was announced, our reproductive rate was below 1. It was around 0.73. We have seen an upward trend, and it's hovering around the 1 area. But we also know that this pulling up of the rate is primarily due to the outbreak in La Loche. Now, that absolutely does not minimize the outbreak in La Loche. That is an outbreak that we very much need to ramp up and have ramped up our efforts to contain that. And it is also a reality that due to hospitalization, if and when required, there will be impacts on healthcare facilities in northern Saskatchewan due to the outbreak, and some of that impact has already been seen. But we also have to realize that whenever we get a localized outbreak in a community, for example, in La Loche, or a large outbreak in a healthcare facility or long-term care facility, we understand that that's a local outbreak, and we have to look at the reproductive rate with that in mind. And so if we look at the reproductive rate, and if we look at our new cases throughout Saskatchewan, the rest of Saskatchewan continues to see very few new cases and very few active cases. So with that, we remain at this point satisfied that our effective reproductive rate, while it's hovering around 1, is lower than 1, well below 1 in the rest of the province. But of course, ongoing concern with the outbreak in La Loche. Thank you.
We'll take our next question from the phone line.
We have Allison Bamford with Global.
Hi there. This is for Deputy Premier Wyant, further to his comments on giving these capital projects to Saskatchewan companies and workers. I'm just wondering if there are any steps in place to ensure that Saskatchewan workers are actually getting these jobs.
Well, thanks for the question. As I mentioned in my opening comments, the work that we have been doing through our single window procurement has resulted in about 92% of projects and contracts being awarded to Saskatchewan companies over the first 6 months of the 2019 fiscal year. We do have a number of options available to us to make sure that we continue to do that. As you may know, we developed a 13-point procurement transformation plan a number of years ago, talking about best value in procurement, talking about vendor performance in procurement. We've developed a number of supplier development programs, including having some business expos. And we know what the capacity of Saskatchewan companies are, and we want to make sure that the capacity of those companies is understood. And so I think some of the additional things that we've been doing at Priority Saskatchewan is going to continue to ensure that these contracts are going to Saskatchewan workers. As I mentioned in my comments, it's precisely our goal to make sure that we put Saskatchewan workers to work to benefit the recovery of the economy here in Saskatchewan. And so I think we have the tools in place to be able to do that. Priority Saskatchewan will be keeping a very, very close eye with respect to not just the tenders, but the award of the tenders, and not just within executive government, but within the Crown sector as well, as far as their procurement is concerned. So we think we're very well positioned to make sure that Saskatchewan companies benefit from not just this investment, but from the entire investment that the Premier's already talked about.
A follow-up, Allison?
Yeah, I just want to confirm that the $46 million for municipal roads and airports is the only new spending through this stimulus package that is dedicated directly to municipal infrastructure?
No, there would be $150 million in the MEEP funding that would be solely dedicated towards municipal infrastructure. And as well as about $130 million that is in our existing 2 years budget in the ISIP funding would be already announced in the existing budgets. But I would also mention that much of the large-scale infrastructure funding will be in the way of not only schools, hospitals, things of that nature that are also directly related to our and located in our municipalities as well. Anything to add to that, Gordon?
No, just to say that, part of the funding was, as the Premier mentioned, the ISIP funding. There's almost $900 million package that's available from the federal government over the 10 years, well, I guess 8 years left, which we can help, which we can work to lever to help support a lot of the projects that are going to be moved forward under the infrastructure plan. So we'll be working to take advantage of as much federal funding as we can in terms of matching contributions for a number of these projects. So we want to thank the federal government for their support with that program.
Allison, I maybe just make a comment to your first question as well, if I could. And I think Priority Saskatchewan has done a good job over the last number of years of working with our industries here in Saskatchewan and our construction industries in particular on striking the balance between ensuring that we are getting access to a competitive bidding environment, if you will, and ensuring that we are getting the maximum return on investment of Saskatchewan people's investment in infrastructure in our communities, whatever that may be, but balancing that with ensuring that we are putting as many Saskatchewan people to work as possible. And so this conversation around putting people to work in our respective provinces is not isolated to Saskatchewan as we look at other provinces as well, look at using infrastructure investment as part of their enhancing the recovery of their economy in their respective province. So there is conversations among provinces, particularly those in Western Canada, as to how we can continue to work together to ensure that we are all accessing that competitive bid environment, if you will, so we're getting good value for our public investment. But also ensuring that we are putting our respective provincial employees to work.
We'll take our next question from the room. Steph?
Yeah, to the Premier, will you be recalling the legislature in some fashion, and if so, in what form, in terms of full sitting and committees? What are we?
I haven't given that degree of thought as to whether we would be recalling the legislature. As you know, all parties agreed to suspend the legislature this spring. And we did that, I believe, on March the 18th, if I'm not mistaken. Prior to doing that, it was very important for us to table the estimates, the spending estimates of the government over the course of the next year, so that people, the opposition, media have the opportunity to have a look at those estimates. And so I have not had a direct conversation with respect to should we be recalling the legislature in any form? Should we be looking at carrying on with some of our committee meetings? The federal legislature, parliament, is starting to operate at a much modified fashion, if you will. I believe there might be one other parliament or legislative assembly that may be looking at a modified, not so much sitting of the legislature, but some committee meetings, if I'm not mistaken. But by far and away, the vast majority of legislatures across the province, across the nation, are not in operation right now, much like Saskatchewan. So it's not a conversation that we've precluded, whether we would or would not be going back into the legislature, but it's just not one that we have had in any depth thus far.
Follow-up, Steph?
Yeah, I want to go back. You didn't really answer my question about the testing. There was a 1,500 target that was set by yourself. That hasn't been met. Is that still the target? And if you've walked away from it, why?
I wouldn't say I've walked away from a target of 1,500 tests. We may well get there. What I would say is that the testing that needs to be done is being done, and I would expect that will increase in the next number of days and for the foreseeable future, until we're able to ensure that we are in a much more manageable situation, if you will, with respect to the spread of this virus, in particular in the northwestern areas of our province. But when you look at the regional breakdown in Saskatchewan, we have 0 cases in southern Saskatchewan. So I don't know how many tests are being done in southern Saskatchewan, but I wouldn't expect it's a large amount. When I had made those comments, we had outbreaks that were coming from a different source, if you would. They were coming from travel, they were coming from large gatherings. And now, much of the transfer that we have is through a community transfer, and it is stemming out of community transfer in the northwestern portions of our province. You're seeing, and you said earlier that the case in Prince Albert, I believe it was you, Steph, that had said the case in Prince Albert was related to an individual that had been or was in the province's northwest. So things have changed here in the province with respect to how the virus is being transmitted, where it is being transmitted, and how in what concentrated areas of the province that it is being transmitted. But I would say this: the testing capacity is there, contact tracing capacity is there, the isolation capacity is there where we need it. Those are the 3 resources that right now we need, and we need in great numbers in the northwestern portion of this province. And we are working with the communities there to provide all of the resources necessary to give us every opportunity to bend the curve, to flatten the curve, if you will, in that area of the province. It's a priority 1 for us. It's a priority 1, I know, for the municipal leadership and the Aboriginal leadership throughout the Northwest, and we're going to work together to achieve it.
We'll take our next question from the phone line, operator.
We have Dan Jones with MBC.
Yeah, good afternoon, Premier. I'm looking at the numbers you released today on the stimulus package, and I'm wondering what discussions you've had with northern leaders about trying to accommodate the $10 million request for immediate relief.
What we have done is worked very closely with northern leaders, as well as the federal government and a number of Indigenous leaders, as well as addressing where the resources need to be supplied, if you will, or provided. I just said we provided over 60 law enforcement officials up into the area. There, I believe the last of that tranche is on their way to the northwest today. Those are resources, human resources, that are being invested in by the people of this province, the government of Saskatchewan, but are being provided on behalf of the communities throughout the Northwest region. We have a number of Saskatchewan healthcare employees that are being provided into the areas of the Northwest to enable and enhance our testing capacity and our contact tracing capacity in that area. That is, I suppose, could be part of a $10 million ask if you would so like to categorize it as that. We've provided a number of self-isolation units, both in existing housing stock that we have in Loche, as well as rolling trailers that we have moved into the community as recently as this week. So we have also provided cash, financial resources, not only to the New North, but also to the community of Loche. So I don't know what the number of provincial investment will be as we find our way through this collaboratively with our northern leaders in addressing and flattening the curve in this area. It may be less than 10 million, it may be more than 10 million, but we're going to continue to work with our local leadership and our federal government, who I might add has also provided 25,000 gloves and masks to the community in the surrounding area of Loche as well. And I've had a number of discussions with the Deputy Prime Minister on this topic of how we can work collaboratively with the local communities to ensure that we come to a good outcome in this region. So I don't know what the number will be at the end of the day, but know this, the resources will be made available as they're required.
Follow up, Dan?
Yes, Mr. Wyant, in terms of your numbers today, Loche has kind of demonstrated that overcrowded housing is a big issue, and that's probably right across the board. What numbers are you looking at for trying to improve housing in northern Saskatchewan?
Well, the number of projects that we're going to evaluate, of course, projects which are a priority to the people of the province of Saskatchewan and municipalities. And so what the plan is with respect to the infrastructure fund, of course, is to make sure that what we're doing is providing resources, providing capital programming right across the province. And so we'll be evaluating any programs, any capital projects that municipalities want to put forward, in conjunction, of course, with our line ministers to discuss where best to make these investments. So we'll be having those conversations with the appropriate ministers and the appropriate municipalities.
And I would add, Dan, there are many capital needs, both of local community value and provincial priority across the province, including the north. We've recently announced investments, for example, of a long-standing ask of some road infrastructure into the community of Wollaston Lake, for example. We have a long-standing conversation with the community of Loche around housing, yes, and we have built a substantial number of housing units there over the course of the last few years, but also education infrastructure in that community. So there is a number of asks in many communities across the province, and that includes communities in the north, and we will work through a collaborative process to ensure that our $2 billion capital injection booster shot, if you will, is getting people to work from corner to corner of this great province.
We've got a couple last questions on the phone line, operator.
We have Ashley Martin with the Leader Post.
Hi. Just relating to Loche again, we've heard from the SHA that there have been some challenges with contact tracing of cases, and I'm just wondering how you respond to that. Are you feeling concerned that some people may be falling through the cracks, and given also that some cases in Prince Albert and elsewhere have been linked to Loche?
Yeah, I would make a brief comment, and then maybe Scott or Dr. Shahab would like to follow up. But I do have concerns, no matter where our approach is, that we may have one or two individuals that do follow through our contact tracing efforts, and that's why I have often said at this table that we should keep a little bit of a running tally in our head of who we have been in contact with over the course of the past 2 weeks. There's some personal responsibility on each of us in this province to be aware and to be aware of who we are spending time with within that 2-meter distance over the course of a couple of weeks, because that's the list that the Saskatchewan Health Authority is going to come and ask you about should you be tested positive. The concerns with cases that are connected with Loche, whether it's people traveling in and then traveling back out, or people from Loche traveling out, I think for the most part will be addressed as we tighten up our public health order and work with our conservation officers and community members on on our, I believe, 13 check stops that we have up and running throughout the north, but much of it focused in on travel in and out of the northwest, as well as travel between communities in the northwest. And so what we're trying to do is to keep the spread of this virus at a minimum, both within the community through positive physical distancing, between communities through our check stops, and encouraging people to stay in their community, and then in and out of the north, as this ultimately came into the north from another area. So, yeah, no, I do have concerns from time to time, but I would also say this about our contact tracing methods within the Saskatchewan Health Authority. They have proven to be very effective. And they have proven to be, I would say, some of the most vigorous contact tracing methods in the nation, from what I am seeing. Time and time again, they are proving to work as we have outbreaks in a number of communities across Saskatchewan, and those outbreaks continually are being contained. We have a much larger situation in the northwest that is going to require and is in the process of requiring a much larger response. Scott or Dr. Shahab, would you have anything to add to that?
So the one thing I would add around contact tracing in the north, and I would agree with everything the Premier has said around some of the recent changes that support better contact tracing, is we continue to send resources to support our colleagues on the ground, both in Loche and our colleagues with the Northern Inland Tribal Health Authority that are working with us on reserve. And also highlight that one of the things we are doing to not up our game, but to get much more detailed contact tracing is by going door to door. And not just looking at existing contacts, close contacts, but doing risk assessments door to door to ensure that we are educating at the same time we're ensuring that families have the ability to have those individuals that are at risk self-isolate.
Do you have a follow-up, Ashley?
Not relating to a Loche, but with elections, Saskatchewan not being able to modernize and go to an online ballot because they just don't have time for that. How do you feel, Premier? I understand that your musings of a spring election were part of the reason this plan of going online kind of got derailed, and I wonder if you how you respond to the fact that the election can't be online and the ballot may put more people at risk of contracting COVID, more people touching ballots and so on.
Well, I would, with respect to decisions that the Chief Electoral Officer has made, he is an independent officer of the Legislative Assembly, and those are decisions that he would have made throughout the course of this spring. And I would think is making just such decisions in advance of preparing for the October 26th election here in the province. Those are his decisions to make. In saying that, we are preparing for an election on October the 26th in Saskatchewan, and it is my expectation that the Chief Electoral Officer will be preparing, and I'm certain that he is. In fact, I know that he is preparing for every advent of ensuring that we can conduct a safe election here in the province of Saskatchewan. And we are making every effort aside and outside of the electoral portion of that conversation to ensure that we do have a safe environment here in Saskatchewan, not only to run an election, but for our businesses to reopen and to engage. Now, in saying that, we are entering a time of a new normal where things are different than they were just a few months ago, and that will quite likely include how we conduct an election here in this fall in Saskatchewan. In the same way, things are different when we go grocery shopping. Things are different when we go into virtually any business in this province. But just as I have confidence in the individuals across Saskatchewan taking their personal responsibility seriously when it comes to physical distancing and protecting themselves and those around them, I have every confidence in the business community in Saskatchewan, where they have already displayed that they can operate safely, encouraging, mandating physical distancing and putting in place parameters so that their employees and their customers are safe. I know that the Chief Electoral Officer will be able to put in just such parameters for us to conduct a safe election here this fall.
And we'll take our last question on the phone line, operator.
We have Lisa Schick with CJME.
Hi, I'm just wondering, the $2 billion above what was announced in March, where is that money coming from? Are we going to be seeing cuts in the near future?
No, the intent is not to see cuts in the near future. This is dollars that will be provided as part of the capital loan program of the province of Saskatchewan. These dollars are coming from this very same place they'd be coming from if you buy a house. We'll be loaning these dollars and providing them to invest in capital, not only in our communities across this province, but also capital that will have the opportunity to put people to work today and enhance our opportunities to expand our economy tomorrow.
Follow up, Lisa?
Yes, this money is all for kind of capital projects, and that specifically kind of immediately only affects construction industry, but there's a lot of other industries in our economy that are hurting as well. So I guess the question is, what about oil and gas? What about agriculture? What about tourism?
Well, absolutely. Our economy here in the province is an export-based economy. It most certainly is, and we are seeing challenges in the energy industry, in the mining industry, in the agricultural industry, most particularly in our livestock industry here today. And we are working very closely with our federal government, as you have seen through the announcement of federal programs, where the province has dovetailed in on a number of federal programs, enhancing those programs and making them more reactive, if you will, for Saskatchewan businesses. And the second piece I would say is Saskatchewan has led the nation in its announcement of reopening sectors of our economy, and doing so in a very methodical and pragmatic way that is not only allowing our businesses to reopen, but ensuring the safety of our customers, our staff, and our families in our communities. So we are an export-based economy, and we will be relying on the value of those exports for the economic recovery, if you will. What we are doing here today with this $2 billion is providing an opportunity to enhance and amplify that economy here in our province, to add to the investment that we know will come from our private sector and from the exports that we provide to the world each and every year.
Thanks very much for joining us today, everyone. That concludes our time.